Over the past week or two, you may have been hearing about some copyright issues when it comes to Bungie and Destiny, videos getting taken down, but Bungie not knowing why it's happening, and this whole situation that I've been sitting on to see how it evolves, and now we got, I think, a better idea for what transpired, and I'd like to delve into that story. The story begins on March 20th of 2022 when we began to see activity from content creators who were complaining that their Destiny videos were being taken down. Now, here is one Twitter user at my name is Biff, or just Biff. He deleted the first two tweets, but here's what that read like based on this Wayback Machine archive. Hey, Bungie, mind telling me why or how my typical lore content is in violation of your 80-20 rule? The 80-20 rule referring to Bungie's community content creation policy, where you can't just upload ripped content from the game, but if it's transformative enough where at least 20% of the content feels user created, then that's fair game. If it does somehow violate the rule, then perhaps myself and the rest of the YouTube community should find another job. This takedown is clearly against Bungie's own policy on community created content. I'm not normally one for rudeness, but whoever is over as CSC, which is the company that handles Bungie's copyright stuff, needs to be reined in hard and reminded of your policy. Are you going to choose them or the community? It's them or us. Pick one. So the Bungie community was pretty pissed off, believing that it was Bungie who was issuing all these unfair takedowns, DMCA takedowns, and then the series of tweets concluded with hate to at you all on a Sunday morning this early, and I believe these are all community managers, but this is getting out of hand. I, for one, am laying the blame at the feet of CSC. Reminder to everyone, the community managers and Bungie didn't do this. Don't harass them. Basically saying there's no way this is an intentional thing on Bungie's end. They've been fostering community content creation all this time. To suddenly flip the switch and start taking these videos down, it makes no sense. So he assumed it's got to be CSC. Maybe they went rogue for some reason. Here we have another content creator going by the name Aztec Cross, who tweeted, our most recent TWAB video was taken down and copyright struck. What is going on? The video is instantly removed and doesn't even allow us to check what was wrong. So yeah, from March 20th, 2022 onwards, there were widespread reports of a number of content creators who were getting their Destiny content unfairly taken down by DMCA, and people were just confused why this was happening, what's going on, what's their recourse given that this is their livelihoods. Beyond that, a number of YouTube channels who have been up for a while now uploading Destiny soundtracks, many of those tracks were being taken down all of a sudden, and all of this was discussed in this Reddit thread with almost 4,500 upvotes that links to all the different occasions and situations and scenarios where these DMCA takedowns happened. Now, Bungie was quick to respond and assured everyone that this is not them, that they're going to look into it and try to resolve it. They tweeted, we're aware of a series of copyright takedowns on YouTube and we're actively investigating. This includes content on our own Bungie channels. These actions are not being taken at the request of Bungie or our partners. Please stand by for future updates. So bizarrely enough, not only were Destiny videos of content creators being taken down, but Bungie's own videos were being DMCA struck, which obviously is normal and goes to highlight that Bungie really wasn't behind this. They were just as confused as everyone, and that clearly some third party was engaging nefariously. And once people came to that realization, things calmed down a bit, with Biff tweeting, this was not Bungie or one of their partners. It's unclear who did this, but one thing is clear, third party is to blame, not Bungie or their partners. We'll get to the bottom of this together. Here we have another response from Twitter user Cheese Forever, who tweeted, Bungie got by fake copyright claims. I don't know if anyone has heard the stories, but basically any company can claim they own any audio on YouTube, leading to false claims to take profit from individuals. Looks like that's happening with Bungie Music, essentially spotlighting the lapse in DMCA security on YouTube's part. Anyone can go to the website and pretend to be anyone and copyright claim anything. And while false claims tend to eventually be resolved, it'll still waste people's time time and money and put content creators' livelihoods at risk or cause a whole lot of harm. And it can happen to not only individual creators, but to major companies like Bungie as well, which really spotlights the lapse in security on YouTube's part. Now, slowly we did start seeing struck down Destiny content coming back. Biff, for example, tweeted this the following day on March 21st, 2022. Sigh of relief, no video today, but at least this one is back up. Hopefully this mess can be sorted out sometime soon. Bungie then issued another response on March 24th, 2022. Clicking on the link will take you to this blog post, and in one of the sections they highlighted how going forward we'll be allowing certain Destiny music tracks to be uploaded on channels for archival purposes, with 3 conditions outlined here. It cannot be a soundtrack song that Bungie has already released or posted elsewhere publicly. The content cannot be monetized. The creator needs to obtain permission from Bungie by contacting this email, licensing@bungie.com. So as long as the intention is archiving and preserving the music, it should be no problem as long as Bungie's made aware of it. So they're being more lenient and flexible about this aspect, and a lot of people found this to be good news. Thank you, thank you, thank you, and everyone that made this happen. I'll be sending an email out as soon as I can. I want to make sure I'm doing everything right. And then Biff also tweeted about this in a positive light. Big win for the archivists. Super glad that Bungie is willing to extend a hand of faith to people saving Destiny's music. I know quite a few of them, and the passion this community has for preserving Destiny's music is fierce. Love that they finally got clarity on this. Keep in mind that Bungie does vault Destiny content, which means that there's some content from the past that's gone forever, and that music would also be lost if it weren't for the archivists. So for that purpose, people are cheering that Bungie is being flexible on this. And Bungie's response and reaction to this whole situation, they've handled it very well, and they've kept in touch with the community, and they've made sure that people are aware that Bungie isn't doing this, and they're seeking recourse, and they've just been handling the situation correctly, so kudos to Bungie on that front. Which finally brings us to what's been revealed about this whole situation. This was first reported by news outlet Torn Freak in an article whose headline reads, Bungie files lawsuit to punish senders of fake Destiny DMCA notices. So Bungie's not playing around here. They are engaging in a full-on lawsuit, and in the lawsuit they have gone on to explain what they think happened, and based on what I read, it honestly seems pretty legitimate what they've presented. So the article begins with a minority of online actors view DMCA notices as tools to disrupt and disappear content that isn't infringing at all. YouTube's DMCA system has been abused time and again, be it by trolls or by people who are not pleased by certain criticisms in a video, so they try to take it down that way, who abuse the system for their own reasons, for selfish reasons, for reasons that are not legitimate, that are not what DMCA laws were made for. Bungie issued another statement revealing that the takedown notices were sent from a fraudulent Google account that was crafted to mimic anti-piracy partner CSC. Google eventually terminated the account, began reversing the fraudulent takedowns while removing copyright strikes against YouTube users. Bungie went on to criticize Google for processing the fake notices, but noted that the company had agreed to implement improvements to reduce such mistakes in the future. Bungie and Google acted to clean up the mess, but it's now clear that Bungie isn't prepared to let this go now that they've gone ahead and filed a full-blown lawsuit in the United States to identify the culprits and hold them to account. What I do love about this is that Bungie isn't just going after the frauds who pretended to be Bungie and took down the videos and harmed community sentiment against Bungie momentarily and caused this whole mess for both Bungie and the Destiny content creators, but the fact that they're actually highlighting that YouTube is part of the issue. The way they've implemented the DMCA system is just so broken and exploitable. For years, people have been calling out YouTube for this, but they have done nothing about it, and now a major company, Bungie, has been afflicted by this, and even they're complaining about the process of getting a hold of YouTube and resolving situations like this quickly. But I'll get to that in a bit. For now, here are more details. Late Friday, Bungie filed a lawsuit in a Washington court against John Doe's 1 through 10, the currently anonymous senders of the fraudulent DMCA notices. So currently, the offenders have not been identified, but this lawsuit is part of that to make sure that they're given the legal means to pursue the identification of these anonymous individuals. The 29-page complaint begins with allegations of abusive notices sent under the DMCA and then lists 5 additional causes of action, including trademark abuse and violations of consumer protection law. Claims which, based on current knowledge, all seem to have merit. The lawsuit states that the bogus copyright complaints not only disrupted Bungie's player community and streamers, but also caused Bungie itself nearly incalculable damage. Indeed, there was a period of time where the Destiny community was about to get up in arms against Bungie, and where tons of headlines were made about all of this. This is just not good optics for Bungie, even though there was a clarification in the end. And then the article proceeds to talk about Bungie's issues with YouTube's DMCA system. Bungie then explains that weakness in YouTube systems mean that these types of abuse are easily carried out. Though defendants were able to send fraudulent notices because of a hole in YouTube's DMCA process security. And hole, I think, is an understatement. This is a massive crater we're talking about, which allows any person to claim to be representing any rights holder in the world for purposes of issuing a DMCA takedown. In other words, as far as YouTube is concerned, any person anywhere in the world can issue takedown notices on behalf of any rights holder anywhere. It's not that there's a hole in the security, there's no security whatsoever. The article then details Bungie's information on how fraudsters managed to do all of this. Bungie says that as long as fraudsters have a Google account, they can fill out a takedown form and YouTube will process the takedown request with no additional checks or verification. At least major companies have the manpower and resources to fight this kind of thing, but when it happens to individual creators, especially smaller ones who have no recourse or who don't have a big enough name for stories like these to spread like wildfire, what is their recourse? Nothing. There's no security, and there's no way to fight situations like this unless you're a big enough name to make enough noise, or unless you're a company with enough influence and power and resources and manpower. This loophole was exploited between March 17th and March 22nd, when a newly created Gmail address, deliberately crafted to look like an email address used by CRC, again the company in charge of Bungie's copyright elements, sent a wave of fake notices to YouTube. They apparently did not look like legitimate CRC notices, but that was a notice at YouTube, meaning that the innocent YouTubers received copyright strikes for no reason. The same Gmail address was used to contact the affected uploaders with messages that attempted to discredit legitimate takedown notices sent by CRC on behalf of Bungie. A second newly created Gmail account was then used to send abusive messages to the email address of Bungie's brand protection vendor. Without any kind of verification system on YouTube's end, anyone can pretend to be any entity and issue any kind of takedowns that they won for any reason whatsoever. And it also allows people to do stuff like this where they can pretend to be a company, behave nefariously, and it makes people believe that the company that the nefarious actors are impersonating are the ones behind all of this when it wasn't them at all. Bungie writes in the lawsuit filing that this caused Bungie significant reputational and economic damage for obvious reasons. The Destiny community was bewildered and upset, believing that Bungie had reneged on a promise to allow players to build their own streaming communities and YouTube channels on Destiny 2 content. A big part of Destiny 2's success is the communal aspect, the community aspect, the content creation aspect. Bungie understands how important the community has been to Destiny's success, and when you go after the community in a way that makes it look like Bungie and CSC went after them, and it causes a major blowback like this, yeah, you can expect a company like Bungie to retaliate. And while Bungie admits it currently doesn't know the identities of those who sent the notices, that's not going to stop them from pursuing the fraudsters. Developer says it will use a DMCA subpoena and other means to identify them and hold them accountable for their tortious and illegal conduct, and frankly to demonstrate to anyone else stupid enough to volunteer as a defendant by targeting Bungie's community for a similar attack that they'll be met by legal process. So Bungie is really not playing around here. Bungie even went out of their way to highlight some of their most influential content creators, including YouTubers My Name is Biff and Dotto, and they stress the importance of the Destiny 2 community and how messing with that damages Destiny and Bungie as a whole. Or as the article put it, a happy community directly reflects in Bungie's bottom line, and the community was not happy when they thought Destiny creators were being targeted by Bungie. So far, Bungie has not only responded to the situation well, but the retaliation, I think, is fair, especially when you get some context as to why these nefarious actors did what they did. And it all started back in early March when CSC was told to issue 41 DMCA takedowns against videos that, in Bungie's view, violated its policy on use of its intellectual property. So earlier this month, Bungie did instruct CSC to take down certain videos that did violate DMCA and that did not uphold Bungie's community guidelines, videos that weren't transformative in any way, shape, or form, and just involved songs ripped from the game cutscenes, or anything else that doesn't contain a substantial amount of player-created content. That 80-20 ratio, where at least 20% roughly of a video should be player-created. In this specific case, all DMCA notices targeted Destiny 2 original soundtracks that were subsequently removed from YouTube for copyright infringement by March 16th, 2022. Now, recall that Bungie has come out and said that we're going to allow people to archive soundtracks as long as we haven't officially uploaded them elsewhere. It would seem as though that wasn't the case with this instance, and Bungie said that there was one specific Gmail address that was used to issue those DMCA takedowns. But then on March 17th, the defendants, the John Does at Bungie suing, crafted their own Gmail account to mimic it in order to send the fraudulent DMCA notices and make it look like CSC was doing it when it was actually a fake account pretending to be CSC. Bungie believes that the YouTube users who were impacted by its earlier DMCA takedown notices decided to teach Bungie a lesson by sending out the wave of fraudulent DMCA notices under the name Bungie Inc. They then sent messages to affected uploaders telling them that the original and real Gmail address used for takedowns was a fraud. So basically, it would seem as though this whole situation was kickstarted by a couple of disgruntled YouTube users who violated the DMCA guidelines and were issued DMCA strikes, who didn't make transformative content, and being upset that their content was taken down, they decided to come up with this whole scheme to do damage against Bungie, but they did so at the expense of a number of content creators. These fraudsters intentionally harmed other content creators to make it look like it was Bungie and CSC going after them. And then to sell the story even more, the defendants also filed a fraudulent DMCA notice against their own YouTube account, which sounds reasonable if the aim is to be seen as a victim. However, they responded to their own fake takedown notice with a DMCA counter notice to YouTube, stating that both the legitimate and fraudulent DMCA notices were fraudulent. Basically just confusing and muddying the waters so that they could harm Bungie and CSC and get some payback because Bungie took down their content, which again didn't meet the guidelines of that 80-20 ratio. And the fact that these fraudsters didn't have to do anything fancy, the fact that it was so easy for them to do this did not go unnoticed by Bungie, and therefore they criticized Google and YouTube. Bungie's lawsuit is particularly scathing of Google and YouTube's processes, noting that the system introduced significant delays due to an opaque support process that stranded Bungie in a circular loop. One would think, oh, Bungie has access to the top people at YouTube, they can easily contact them and get this taken care of, but even for major companies, support is just god-awful, and they get trapped in these loops that causes delays that just extends the damage for longer periods of time, because YouTube is not only lax in its security, but is also very just unresponsive or very late to respond. In order to get something done, Bungie involved its global franchise and global finance directors, but by March 21st, responses still hadn't arrived. On March 22nd, Google said that it had suspended the accounts of the fraudsters, but would not reveal their identities, which is why Bungie filed this lawsuit, which will compel Google to do so. The lawsuit notes that one of the defendants sent emails to YouTubers admitting their part in the scheme and blaming YouTube and Bungie for various shortcomings. So there's actual evidence to prove that what Bungie is claiming is true. Here's a portion of the email in question. Finally, I know this hardly means anything, but I apologize to you and everyone else who was affected by my selfish actions. You have every right to be furious with me. My goal was to get Bungie to see the fake takedowns and stop them. That's all. But the irony of these fraudsters' actions is that they became the very monster they were fighting against, if you will. They are criticizing Bungie for taking advantage of the DMCA system to harm content creators. That's what they claim with their circumstance. But as payback, they decided to hurt content creators for their own gain by coming up with this whole scheme that harms both the company and the content creators. They essentially took sort of a nuclear option instead of approaching this in a better fashion that didn't make them look like hypocrites. And the consequences will be severe. Bungie is piling on with a number of claims, including that defendants sent fraudulent DMCA notices containing knowing and material misinterpretations. By referencing Bungie Inc. in the notices, the defendants stand accused of breaching Bungie trademarks with intent to deceive, and by removing the videos from YouTube which contain copyrighted Bungie content, the defendants infringe the company's right to authorize the public display and performance of its copyrighted works. And then here is a quote from the complaint. As such, Bungie is entitled to damages and injunctive relief, including enhanced statutory damages of $150,000 for each fraudulent takedown notice that willfully infringe Bungie's copyrights, throwing in allegations of business defamation, violations of the Washington Consumer Protection Act, and breach of contract for good measure. They're pulling all stops. They are going all in on discovering every crime that legally happened here, and there seem to be quite a few based on Bungie's filing. But at the end of the day, I'm no lawyer. There's a legal case that's out of all of our hands, and we'll see how this whole situation develops. But this is a case where Bungie clearly seems to be in the right. The fraudsters clearly engaged in a way that was harmful to the community and Bungie itself. And based on what we currently know, it doesn't seem like there was any justification for the fraudsters to do what they did, as it would seem as though they didn't follow community guidelines when it comes to content uploads and just straight up ripped content from the game that then they uploaded without any sort of transformative elements, and perhaps they were monetizing it as well, which only makes their case worse. Who knows? We'll see, but yeah, Bungie, I think, has responded appropriately, and their criticism of not only the nefarious actors, but of YouTube, I think, are very appropriate. It is YouTube, ultimately, their lack security, their awful DMCA system, and their awful support system that has allowed for this to be far more damaging than it could have been, and for this to happen at all. And I'm glad that Bungie's calling out YouTube on that, because it is not just affecting major companies like Bungie. It is even more adversely affecting individual creators like myself. But even I'm in a more privileged position, because at least I'm well known enough that if I, put out something out there saying this false copyright claim was issued, word might spread far enough that YouTube would resolve this. But for smaller creators, they may go ignored. Nobody might pay attention to them. But now with a major company like Bungie slamming YouTube for this, maybe that will be at least one step forward in helping YouTube realize that their system needs to be updated ASAP, and that they need to implement just something better, something more secure, something that doesn't assume guilty before proven innocent, something that doesn't tear content creators down before they've had a chance to fight back or to prove that any claims against them were fraudulent. So yeah, that's the current situation, ladies and gentlemen. The short-lived narrative that Bungie was going after their Destiny content creators, that was all wrong, and it made no sense. It certainly did confuse a lot of people while it was happening, but things have been clarified, and now with this lawsuit, there's even more context, and things are looking to be in Bungie's favor, both in this legal matter and also in terms of optics. On top of the fact that Bungie responded well to the situation, it would seem as though Bungie is in the right here. It would seem as though they have every right to pursue this lawsuit. It would seem as though the damage done by all of this, especially from a PR perspective, was pretty substantial, and Bungie is going to go after the nefarious actors, and they better brace themselves, because so far it's looking like they don't have much of a defense here, and they've only pissed off both a major company, Bungie, and its community, who were harmed by these fraudsters' actions, who claim to be doing this in the name of justice or whatever. This is all one man's take. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on this whole situation. And to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.